Once upon a time, in a small village nestled deep in the woods, there lived a young girl named Sarah. She was known throughout the village for her beauty and kind heart, but there was one thing that set her apart from everyone else: her vivid and terrifying nightmares. Every night, Sarah would go to bed, and within minutes, she would be plunged into a world of darkness and terror. She would dream of twisted, gnarled trees that reached out to grab her, and creatures with glowing eyes that stalked her through the shadows. But the worst part of her nightmares were the whispers. They would echo through her mind, promising to take her away to a place of eternal suffering if she ever dared to close her eyes again. Despite her fear, Sarah tried to ignore her nightmares and went about her days as normal. She would tell herself that they were just dreams and that there was nothing to be afraid of. But as the days turned into weeks and the weeks turned into months, her nightmares became more and more frequent and vivid. One night, as Sarah lay in bed, she heard a voice whispering her name. She knew it was the voice from her nightmares, and this time it was coming from outside of her dream. She sat up in bed, her heart pounding in her chest, and looked around her room. But there was nothing there. The next night, the voice returned, but this time it was louder and more insistent. Sarah could hear it clearly, even over the sound of her own breathing. It was calling her name, and it seemed to be coming from the shadows in the corner of her room. Sarah tried to stay awake, but eventually exhaustion overtook her and she fell asleep. But her sleep was far from peaceful. She dreamed of a dark and twisted forest, where the trees reached out to grab her, and the creatures with glowing eyes stalked her through the shadows. And then she heard the voice again. This time it seemed to be coming from the darkness itself. "Come with me," the voice whispered. "Come and see the horrors that await you in the land of eternal darkness." Sarah woke up in a cold sweat, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew that she couldn't ignore her nightmares any longer. She needed to find out what was causing them and put a stop to it. She went to the local wise woman, who listened to her story and then told her that the only way to stop the nightmares was to go to the source of them, the dark forest at the edge of the village. Sarah knew that the forest was dangerous and that many people had gone into it, but never returned. But she also knew that she had no choice. She had to face her fears and put an end to her nightmares once and for all. She set out the next morning, armed with nothing but a knife and a lantern. As she walked deeper into the forest, the trees closed in around her, and the darkness seemed to grow thicker. She could hear the creatures of the forest moving in the shadows, but she pushed on, determined to find the source of her nightmares. Eventually, she came to a clearing, and there in the center of it stood a twisted, gnarled tree. It seemed to pulse with an unearthly energy, and Sarah could feel the weight of its gaze upon her. As she approached the tree, she heard a voice whispering her name. It was the same voice from her nightmares, and this time it was coming from the tree itself. "Come closer," the tree whispered. "Come and see the horrors that await you in the land of eternal darkness." Sarah knew that she had found the source of her nightmares. She could feel the tree's power and knew that it was trying to lure her in with promises of darkness and horror. She knew that she had to be strong and that she could not give in to the tree's temptations. With a deep breath, Sarah stepped forward and plunged her knife deep into the trunk of the tree. The tree let out a deafening scream, and the ground beneath Sarah's feet began to shake. The creatures of the forest, which had been stalking her through the shadows, began to emerge from the darkness, their glowing eyes fixed on her. But Sarah did not falter. She held her ground and continued to stab the tree with all her might. The tree's screams grew louder and louder until finally, with one final scream, it burst into a shower of sparks and disappeared into the darkness. The creatures of the forest, now without their master, began to retreat back into the shadows. Sarah knew that she had defeated the source of her nightmares, and that she would never have to fear the darkness again. With a sense of victory, Sarah made her way back to the village, where she was greeted as a hero. The villagers were amazed by her bravery and her ability to conquer her fears. And from that day on, Sarah never had another nightmare again. But despite the victory and peace, Sarah couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched, a presence of something eerie following her every move. She never spoke of her experience again and lived the rest of her days in silence. Sarah's victory over the tree in the forest brought her peace for a time, but soon she began to notice that something was still not right. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, and she began to have strange dreams once again. These dreams were different from her previous nightmares. They were more like memories. In these dreams, she saw herself in the forest, standing before the twisted tree, but this time she did not stab it. Instead, she embraced it and it seemed to merge with her. As the days passed, Sarah's dreams grew more vivid and more frequent. She could feel the tree's presence inside her, and she knew that it had not truly been defeated. She knew that she had to return to the forest and finish what she had started. Sarah set out once again into the forest, this time with a determination to destroy the tree once and for all. As she walked deeper into the forest, the trees seemed to close in around her, and she could feel the tree's presence growing stronger. She could hear the creatures of the forest moving in the shadows, but she pushed on, determined to find the tree and put an end to its hold on her. Finally, she came to the clearing, and there in the center of it stood the twisted, gnarled tree. It pulsed with an unearthly energy, and Sarah could feel the weight of its gaze upon her. As she approached the tree, she heard a voice whispering her name. It was the same voice from her nightmares, but this time it seemed to be coming from within her. "Come closer," the tree whispered. "Come and be one with the land of eternal darkness." Sarah knew that she had to resist the tree's temptations. She knew that it had not truly been defeated, and that it was still trying to lure her in with promises of darkness and horror. With a deep breath, Sarah stepped forward and plunged her knife deep into the trunk of the tree. The tree let out a deafening scream, and the ground beneath Sarah's feet began to shake. The creatures of the forest, which had been stalking her through the shadows, began to emerge from the darkness, their glowing eyes fixed on her. But Sarah did not falter. She held her ground and continued to stab the tree with all her might. The tree's screams grew louder and louder until finally, with one final scream, it burst into a shower of sparks and disappeared into the darkness. The creatures of the forest, now without their master, began to retreat back into the shadows. Sarah knew that she had defeated the tree once and for all. She felt a sense of victory, but also a deep sadness. She realized that the tree had been a part of her, and that by destroying it, she had also destroyed a part of herself. Sarah made her way back to the village, but she could not shake off the feeling of loss and emptiness. She knew that she had saved herself from the tree's darkness, but she also knew that she would never be the same again. She had lost a part of herself in the process, and she knew that she would carry that loss with her for the rest of her days. From that day on, Sarah lived a solitary life, never truly connecting with anyone again. She never spoke of her experience in the forest to anyone, and most of the villagers eventually forgot about her story. But Sarah never forgot. She knew that the darkness of the tree would always be a part of her, and that she would always carry it with her as a reminder of the price she had paid for her victory. Years passed, and Sarah learned to live with the darkness that lingered within her. She found solace in the small garden she tended to in her backyard and the company of her pets. But as she grew older, Sarah began to realize that she was not meant to live alone forever. She yearned for companionship and love. One day, a young man named Jack moved into the village. He was kind and gentle, and he quickly took notice of Sarah. Despite her reluctance to open up, Jack persisted, and over time, Sarah found herself falling for him. They began to spend more and more time together, and Sarah found that with Jack by her side, the darkness that lingered within her began to fade. He helped her to see the beauty in the world again, and she found that she was finally able to let go of her past and move on. As Sarah and Jack's love grew stronger, they decided to get married. They had a beautiful ceremony in the village, surrounded by their friends and family. Sarah felt truly happy for the first time in years, and she knew that she had finally found the peace she had been searching for. Years passed, and Sarah and Jack had children of their own. Sarah found joy in watching them grow and in teaching them about the world. She also shared her love for gardening with her children, and they often spent time in the garden together. Despite the hardships she had faced, Sarah knew that everything had happened for a reason. The tree in the forest had been a test of her strength and courage, and through it she had found true love and happiness. And as she looked out at her family and the life she had built, she knew that she would never have to fear the darkness again. From that day on, Sarah lived a peaceful life, surrounded by the love of her